across the state of Goa, my dear students and esteemed members of the community. It's my profound privilege to welcome you all to this historic occasion as we come together to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution of India, a document that stands as the bedrock of our democracy and a beacon of hope and justice for billions. Today, we honor the vision and sacrifices of the framers of our Constitution, led by the extraordinary Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. They gave us not just a legal framework, but a moral compass that enshrines the ideals of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. It's a day to reflect on the resilience of this living document, which has guided our nation through triumphs and challenges alike. The 75 years of Indian Constitution is not merely a milestone. It's a moment of introspection and renewal. It reminds us of the shared responsibility we bear to uphold the values of our Constitution and to ensure that its promises are realized for every citizen of this great nation. As a university, we have a vital role in fostering the principles enshrined in the Constitution, promoting critical thinking, encouraging informed discourse, and nurturing a commitment to inclusivity and social justice. Education, after all, is the most powerful tool for sustaining democracy. I encourage each one of us to use this occasion, deepen our understanding of the Constitution and its relevance in contemporary times. Let us revisit the preamble and fundamental rights and duties, and let us reaffirm our commitment to building a nation that upholds dignity, diversity, and development for all. On this note, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for taking part in this, in this event. We have come together to make this celebration meaningful, and therefore let us carry forward the legacy of our Constitution with the pride and purpose. Once again, I welcome all of you to this momentous occasion. May the spirit of the Constitution continue to inspire us all in the years to come. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Professor, for your warm welcome. To officially inaugurate this momentous year-long celebration and today's keynote session, I invite our dignitaries to join us in lighting the ceremonial lamp. This act signifies the enlightenment of knowledge and triumph of hope and unity. The lighting of the lamp signifies the year-long celebration of the Constitution, which is not only a tribute but a dynamic dialogue, which will encompass a Constitution moot court, national conference, and events at various colleges. Put your hands together as we inaugurate this year-long series on Constitution. Thank you to our esteemed dignitaries for participating in the inaugural with lighting of the lamp. This act, rich in symbolism, reminds us of how light dispels darkness, much like the Constitution of India. which illuminates the path of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity for our nation. As this flame burns bright, it inspires us to uphold these values in all our endeavors. As we proceed with the keynote address, I request our dignitaries to kindly take a seat in the audience. I request students, please come ahead and lend your ears to the meaningful and impactful keynote speech which we are going to have. Rights and duties are two sides of the same coin. While rights dominate our discussion, it is our duties that form the bedrock of a functioning, harmonious society. Yet they often remain overlooked in public discourse. This momentous occasion, as it commemorates 75 years of adoption of the Constitution, it is something that remind us as responsible citizens. Our keynote address will shed light on the historical development of these duties, their constitutional importance, and their relevance in shaping a progressive nation. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment that we all have been eagerly awaiting. My distinct honor to introduce the keynote speaker, Honorable Justice his BE in History from College University and his LB from Law Center, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. He enrolled with the Bar Council of Delhi on July 24, 1986 and began his legal practice as a senior advocate in 2006. He served as the standing Constitutional of India before being elevated to the bench as Additional Judge of Delhi High Court in 2008. Has been defined by judgments and steadfast commitment to justice, culminating into his appointment as Chief Justice of High Court of Manipur in 2023. Recently retired, his legal acumen and judicious temperament remain a source of inspiration for our legal fraternity. So, we are deeply privileged to have you share your insights with us today. I welcome you to the podium. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, Suprabhat. Welcome to the inaugural function for the 75th celebrations of India's Constitution. Dr. Pramod Sawant, the Honorable Chief Minister of Goa, in absentia. Dr. Alexio Sequeira, the Honorable Minister for Law and Judiciary and Legislative Affairs, Sri Yuri Alemão, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition in Goa, Sri Devidas J. Pangam, Senior Advocate, the Learned Advocate General of Goa, Dr. V. Kandavelu, IS, the Chief Secretary, Sri Sandeep Jacks, IS, Secretary Law, Judiciary and Legislative Affairs, Sri Prasad Lolekar, IS, Secretary Education, Professor Menon and Professor Savaikar, the Directorate of Higher Education. Sarvana Samvidhan Divasacha Hardik Shubhecha. Democracy is not merely a form of government. It is essentially an attitude of respect and reverence towards fellow men. And I borrow these words from the venerated Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, the architect of India's Constitution and the greatest legal luminary and philosopher that this country had the privilege to produce. While much discourse centers on the rights granted to citizens, it is the concept of fundamental duties that inculcates the essence of responsible citizenship and collective welfare. It is these moral and ethical obligations that I will expound upon today. The fundamental duties, as eventually enshrined in Article 51A of the Indian Constitution, signify a beacon guiding citizens towards a harmonious and productive relationship not only with their nation but with their fellow men as well. As John F. Kennedy famously and memorably stated, and I quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," unquote. The fundamental duties incorporated into the Indian Constitution by the enactment of the 42nd Constitutional Amendment in 1976 were not originally so included by the framers of the Constitution. The Constitution of India, the world's longest and biggest written constitution, foresaw a holistic approach towards civic life in a democratic and egalitarian polity. The reason possibly why it was not considered imperative to include fundamental duties originally is that dharma, which is deeply ingrained in all of us, has since time immemorial inspired every inhabitant of this holy land to discharge certain moral duties as basic values without the need of legal sanction or prescription. All of us existing beings accepted and respected our dharma to sustain harmony and order in the world. Dharma is the truth that all natures are pure. And I quote Bodhidharma, who was referred to as Damo in Sanskrit, the founder of Zen Buddhism in China, Japan, Korea, and the Far East. And the Dalai Lama says that dharma is, at its core, ethical behavior. Even otherwise, we the people encapsulated the duties of citizens in the preamble to the Constitution itself. The preamble, as all of us know, contains not only the aspirations of all Indians, the goals of the nation, but also the assurances of the Constitution. It was axiomatic that whatever was required for the fulfillment of these goals would be undertaken by every citizen as his bounden and pious duty. However, the post-Constitution civic life for around a quarter of a century did not paint a rosy picture, and it was therefore thought fit and necessary to set out a framework of duties in the Constitution itself. No democratic polity can achieve success where citizens assert their rights alone but neglect to actively discharge citizenship duties by assuming responsibilities and coming forward to give their best to the country. Moreover, logically, the fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution as a natural corollary give rise to a corresponding obligation to discharge a set of duties essential for the former's realization. If rights are available to the people, by inference, corresponding duties correlated to the rights are required to be performed as well. The father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, appositely posited, and I quote, "The true source of right is duty. If we all discharge our duties, rights will not be far to seek. If leaving duties unperformed, we run after rights alone, they will escape us like the will-o'-the-wisp. The more we pursue them, the farther they will fly," unquote. Rights are thus related to functions and are given only in relation for some duties to be performed. Rights are conferred not for individual upliftment alone, but inextricably for larger social and collective good. Therefore, it was considered necessary to formulate proposals for inclusion of fundamental duties in the Constitution of India. The fundamental duties are essentially obligations which every citizen owes to the nation. The non-compliance with these duties was meant to be met with a sanction. However, the fundamental duties were not envisaged to take away the scope of the rights, but to ensure a democratic balance. The chapter on fundamental rights was meant to have a sobering effect on the restless spirits who have led a host of anti-national, subversive and unconstitutional agitations. The general objectives behind the 42nd Amendment were to remove the difficulties felt in achieving the objective of socio-economic revolution, to end poverty, ignorance, disease and inequality. Permit me to then encapsulate briefly the fundamental duties and their correlation with fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy. Article 51A of the Constitution in Part 4A provides for 11 fundamental duties, and these are to abide by the Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions, the national flag and the national anthem, to cherish and follow the noble ideals that inspired the national struggle for freedom, to protect and uphold the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India, to defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so, to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic and regional or sectional diversities, and to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women, to value and preserve the rich heritage of the country's composite culture, to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures, to develop a scientific temper, humanism and the spirit of inquiry and reform, to safeguard public property and to abjure violence, to strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity, so that the nation constantly rises to higher levels of endeavor and achievement. And lastly, to provide opportunities for education to children or ward between the ages of 6 and 14. Since the original constitution as framed by the Constituent Assembly did not include a chapter on fundamental rights, we borrowed from the constitution of the former USSR when it came to fundamental duties in view of the disturbances that had assumed alarming proportions in the 70s. Now, let me just briefly elaborate on the features of the fundamental duties. And these are quite distinct. These rights, these duties are non-justiciable, inasmuch as they are not enforceable by law through the judiciary. However, they serve as moral obligations and guiding principles for citizens. The scope of the fundamental duties is confined to citizens alone and does not extend to foreigners. These duties draw inspiration from various sources, including, as I said, the constitution of the erstwhile Soviet Union, the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi and other constitutional experts. They reflect a blend of national and international values. These fundamental duties guide the behavior and conduct of citizens and serve as a moral compass for shaping a responsible and law-abiding society. Significantly, they refer to values that have been part of Indian traditions and practices. Thus, they essentially are a codification of tasks integral to the Indian way of life. Some of them are in the form of moral duties, for example, cherishing noble ideals of the national freedom struggle, while others are civic duties, like respecting the Constitution. What is the significance of fundamental duty? In my view, they promote civic consciousness, educational and cultural promotion, harmonization with rights, promotes participation of people in the national process. It prevents and protects the preservation of national unity and integrity, inculcates moral and ethical values, promotes democratic principles, and promotes social welfare. It is complementary to fundamental rights with which it is correlated. And these duties serve as guiding principles for lawmakers and policymakers in shaping laws and policies for the betterment of society. Lastly, it aids the judiciary in determining the constitutionality of any law, and if the court finds that the law in question seeks to give effect to a fundamental duty, it may consider such law to be reasonable in relation to Article 14, equality before law, and Article 19, the fundamental freedoms. Thus, they help the judiciary in examining and determining the constitutional validity of a law. And finally, the inclusion of fundamental duties enhances India's standing on the global stage by showcasing its citizens' dedication to democratic values and constitutional principles. Permit me to briefly focus on the relationship between fundamental rights and fundamental duties. The relationship between these rights and duties can be summarized as correlative and complementary. The performance of fundamental duties by citizens is necessary for creating an enabling environment for others to enjoy their fundamental rights. Similarly, rights are precursors to duties, and without fulfillment of rights, individuals can't perform their duties. Without fulfillment of the right to education, it is difficult to expect the duty to respect the dignity of women. Therefore, the relationship between fundamental rights and fundamental duties is inseparable. And I will illustrate that. Article 19 provides for freedom of speech and expression. However, it also provides that the state can impose reasonable restrictions on this right on the grounds of sovereignty and integrity of India and the security of the state, among others. Article 51AC casts a fundamental duty correspondingly on citizens to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India. Likewise, Article 21 contains within its scope and ambit the right of women to be treated with dignity and decency. And Article 51A(e) directs the citizens to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women. Article 21(a) guarantees free and compulsory education for all between the age of 6 and 14 years, as well as Article 51(a)(k), which asks the citizens to provide opportunities for education to his child ward between the age of 16 to 14 years. Article 23(2) provides that the state can impose compulsory service for public purposes such as military service. And Article 51(a)(d) asks the citizens to defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so. I will briefly allude to the relationship between fundamental duties and the directive principles of state policy as well. Although non-justiciable in nature, the directive principles of state policy are also a type of rights to be enjoyed by citizens. And the relationship between the DSPS and fundamental duties is also of a correlative and complementary nature. The same is as follows. Directive Principles of State Policy, Article 48A, directs the state to protect the environment and to safeguard forests and wildlife, and correspondingly Article 51AG provides for a fundamental duty of citizens to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, wildlife, etc. So on and so forth. Lastly, I would dwell on the relationship between fundamental duties and the preamble. Fundamental duties require all citizens to respect the ideals of the Constitution and the institutions, the national flag and the national anthem. Whereas the preamble has mentioned the ideals of the Constitution as justice, liberty, equality and fraternity. Therefore, in every word, deed and thought, we must remember and practice these ideals of the Constitution. Although there's a lot of criticism about the fundamental duties, they have by and large galvanized the people of India into recognizing that before you ask for something, you must be willing to contribute to the growth of the nation as well. A right generally implies a corresponding duty. They are two sides of the same coin. It is for this reason that the two concepts, right and duty, are considered correlatives and therefore inextricable. Sir Holland explains, every right, whether moral or legal, implies the active or passive furtherance by others of the wishes of the party having the right. Wherever anyone is entitled to such furtherance on the part of others, such furtherance on their part is said to be their duty. The two concepts are so interwoven that they cannot be divorced from each other. Therefore, it is pertinent that every right must be complemented by a duty. Lastly, I would like to dwell on what I would like to see incorporated in Part 4A of the Constitution as fundamental duties. And the principal fundamental duty that I would like to see incorporated is the duty to vote. Active participation by citizens in the election process is the cornerstone of any democracy. India has provided us with a constitution which provides the citizens with the right to vote. Article 326 of the Constitution, read with Section 62 of the Representation of Peoples Act 1951, confers the right to vote. However, quite often the question arises as to whether that right also implies an obligation. To understand it in a nutshell, a right is a privilege to be granted, whereas an obligation is an act or omission which one is required to do. Therefore, it is very crucial to analyze if adult suffrage should be articulated as a right as well as a duty to vote. Voting is considered as our civic duty determining our future, and citizens need to play a part in its shaping. Voting provides citizens with an opportunity to benefit the society through their involvement in the democratic process. We must, in today's backdrop, take voter apathy very seriously, because in a large number of states we have noticed that the percentage of voting has been dropping alarmingly, and there is an apathy towards exercising their right. Besides the right to the duty to vote, what is most important for our polity is the duty to pay taxes. And I believe that it should become a part of our fundamental duties. The duty to pay tax springs from providing the state with its means of existence. The state performs essential functions like maintenance of law and order, education, regulation of trade, etc. And its ability to perform these functions is contingent on the fact that it has the finances to do so. All these functions are paramount for the civic organization of society. Without taxes, the very existence of the state would be in peril. Therefore, the duty to pay taxes becomes a salient part of one's citizenship. Several countries like Tunisia, China, Kuwait and the erstwhile UAR made provisions in their respective constitutions regarding the duty of a citizen to contribute to the public exchequer according to its capacity. The statistics that are available with us show that Indian citizens do not believe that it is their duty to pay tax, but it is the duty of the state to collect it. The collection of taxes thereby becomes like the proverbial game of cat and mouse. The Supreme Court has long wrestled with the concepts of tax planning, tax avoidance, tax evasion, etc. Such disputes are reflective of the general attitude of the masses towards the taxation regime and indicates how paying taxes is considered a burden and not a duty. Research has found that tax evasion is a direct result of lack of trust amongst the people in general and the government in particular. For people to want to pay taxes, they must not only believe that their tax bill is fair, but also that their destiny is bound up with that of their fellow citizens. Citizens must believe that their taxes are bound to be used for public good. Once such faith is established, the struggle between what is immediately beneficial for the taxpayer as against what is good for society, of which the taxpayer is a member and a direct beneficiary, will disappear. The incorporation of the right to pay taxes as part of fundamental duties in the Constitution will shift the onus onto the taxpayer to pay taxes rather than the tax department to collect them. The reassertion of the moral belief that one must pay taxes as part of their citizenship may result in a more effective and robust system of collection as opposed to the current system where the citizen is pursued by the tax department to compel him to pay his taxes. One important duty that I would like to see incorporated into part 4 as a fundamental duty is the duty to help accident victims. Every 60 minutes, 15 persons die in traffic accidents in India. According to the Law Commission, at least 50% of the fatalities would have been prevented if road accident victims receive medical attention within the critical first hour after the accident. According to the data released by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways in 2013, around 1,37,572 people lost their lives in road accidents. The number translates into 380 deaths approximately per day. Further, a 2006 study conducted by the Indian Journal of Surgery shows that 80% of victims in India do not receive emergency medical care within the golden hour. Often, accident victims complain about how none of the bystanders lent a helping hand. A 2013 survey conducted by Save Life Foundation focused on improving road safety and emergency care in India shows that 74% bystanders are unlikely to assist a seriously injured person on the road, irrespective of whether they are alone at the spot or in the presence of others. And you must have all noticed this pernicious habit of all of us to be shooting videos when there is an accident on the road. This must stop. This must stop. Under the law of torts, there is a duty to rescue which talks about circumstances where a party can be held liable for not coming to the rescue of a party in peril. In most of the common law countries, it is rarely formalized in statutes, which would bring the penalty down upon those who fail to rescue. In the Canadian province of Quebec, which is a civil law jurisdiction, there is a general duty to rescue in its Charter of Rights. It says every human being whose life is in peril has a right to assistance. Every person must come to the aid of anyone whose life is in peril, either personally or by calling for aid, by giving him the necessary and immediate physical assistance, unless it involves danger to him or a third person or he has another valid reason. We would do well to emulate the Canadian government. The Karnataka government once took a decision to frame a Good Samaritan law as part of an effort to encourage people to offer assistance without fear of any criminal or civil liability, which was a step in the right direction. Governments of other states and union territories such as Rajasthan and Delhi are also in the process of drafting similar bills. But I would recommend that a national legislation on the subject be taken up so that Good Samaritans or helpful bystanders become a standard operating procedure. One important thing where the government has done salutary work, which is commendable, is the duty to keep the country clean, which should also now become a part of a fundamental duty. Hygiene and cleanliness, as they say, is next to godliness, and they are directly linked with health, and therefore we need it necessarily for full and proper enjoyment of life. However, this obligation to keep one's own premises and the country clean have been largely ignored. Widespread littering and poor sanitary conditions have become common features of Indian society. To combat this problem, the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, has come up with a very ambitious and successful project, the Swachh Bharat Mission, in 2014. The program has focused on building toilets and solid waste management plants. The program emphasizes the need for behavioral change with respect to littering and community-led cleanliness drives. It has received tremendous support from people from all walks of life. At this juncture, I would like to pause and request all the citizens of Goa to help in the cleaning up of the beaches. And it would be salutary if all of us, as and when we visit beaches, make sure that all the plastic that is generated and thrown away into the sea every day is collected and deposited with the municipal authorities. I would therefore suggest that the union government should enact a legislation with regard to sanitation and cleanliness, since public health and sanitation fall within the concurrent list. There are a large number of duties that I'd like to see incorporated in fundamental duties, but I would conclude today's address by mentioning that we have a right and we must have a duty to support civil service and civil society organizations in their movements. These movements are aimed at improving the lot of the people, and the culture of an organized and effective civil society from medieval times was for what was the Gandhian principle of volunteerism, and it was signified by the Bhudan movement and the JP movement, which were based on the disenchantment of the ordinary citizen with institutions of governance. Therefore, I would strongly recommend that we support civil society organizations and NGOs in filling the gaps where the government cannot reach. In conclusion, in the modern context, it has become increasingly important to instill a reinvigorated sense of civic responsibility among Indian citizens. This can be achieved by adding new duties to the existing list of fundamental duties, while also laying emphasis on the performance of the existing ones. Excessive emphasis on exercise of fundamental rights by citizens diminishes the importance of performance of their correlated duties. The continued expansion of fundamental rights of citizens needs to be met with additional responsibilities imposed on them for an improved quality of Indian society. There is a perception that since fundamental duties are not enforceable in courts of law, they don't hold significance. Merely because a rule is not backed by sanctions on disobedience does not mean it has no importance. It is still regarded as a rule of law that is expected to be followed. Although in the context of directive principles, which are essentially duties owed by the state towards its citizens, the Supreme Court in Minerva Mills Limited and others versus Union of India recognized the proposition that there may be a rule which imposes an obligation on an individual or authority, and yet it may not be enforceable in a court of law, and therefore not give rise to a corresponding enforceable right in another person. But it would still be a legal rule because it prescribes a norm of conduct to be followed by such individual or authority. The law may provide a mechanism for enforcement of this obligation, but the existence of the obligation does not depend upon the creation of such mechanism. The obligation exists prior to and independent of the mechanism of enforcement. A rule imposing an obligation or duty would not therefore cease to be a rule of law because there is no regular judicial or quasi-judicial machinery to enforce its command. Such a rule would exist despite of any problem relating to its enforcement. Otherwise, the conventions of the Constitution and even rules of international law would no longer be liable to be regarded as rules of law. Therefore, in my view, fundamental duties too, like rules of law, must be observed by all. Their significance is not diminished by the fact that there is no punishment prescribed for not following them. Fundamental duties should be treated as constitutional values that must be propagated by all citizens. The idea behind implementing fundamental duties of citizens was to serve a useful purpose. In particular, it is impossible for a democratic polity to ever succeed where its citizens are not willing to be active participants in the process of governance by assuming responsibilities and discharging citizenship duties. Therefore, the most important task before us is to reconcile the claims of the individual citizen and those of civic society. To achieve this, it is required to orient the citizen to be conscious of his social and citizenship responsibilities, and the society should be shaped in such a way that we allow and show our utmost respect to the inalienable rights of our fellow citizens. Awareness of our citizenship duties is as important as the awareness of our rights. Thus, fundamental duties act as the foundation of human dignity and national character. Those duties actually constitute the conscience of our Constitution. I thank you for having invited me and given me this opportunity to speak to you today on such a significant day. Jai Hind and Jai Goa.
Thank you, Justice Mridul, for the enlightening and thought-provoking address on fundamental duties. Part 4 of the Constitution, something which is overlooked not only in our daily lives, but also by the students studying Constitution 1 papers during the exams. We are privileged to have amongst us a chief guest of our Honorable Chief Minister of Goa. I request all to welcome sir with a thunderous applause. Now I request the students to hold on to your thoughts on fundamental duties, and shortly we will be coming back for a round of questions and answers. At this moment, I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor to please escort the dignitaries along with our chief guest of today's ceremony onto the dais. As a token of our welcome, I request Honorable Vice Chancellor of Goa University, Senior Professor Harilal B. Menon, to welcome the chief guest with a basket of fruits. Thank you, Professor. It is now my privilege to invite our chief guest, Dr. Pramod Sawant, Honorable Chief Minister of Goa, to address this august gathering. Sir is a leader who has consistently emphasized the values of good governance and sustainable development in building a brighter future for our state and students. Sir, I request you to address the gathering.
Good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon. 75 years of the Indian Constitution, Directorate of Higher Education and Goa University हांच्या वतीन आयोजित केल्ल्या आयच्या ह्या समारंभाक आमच्या मदीं आसात आमचे लॉ मिनिस्टर श्री अलेक्स सिक्वेरा, लीडर ऑफ ऑपोजिशन युरिया आलेमो, आमचे एडवोकेट जनरल देविदास पांगम, त्याच बरोबर आज खास करून आमकां मार्गदर्शन करपाक आयिल्ले जस्टिस मृदुल व्यासपीठाचेर आशिल्ले बाकीचे कांडावलू आनी VC श्री मेनन. म्हाका दिसता आयचो टॉपिक आमी जे पळयता की 26 नोव्हेंबर हो दीस म्हणजे 26 जानेवारी जर इम्पॉर्टन्स केन्ना आसत जाल्यार ते 26 नोव्हेंबर ह्या दिसा. आमी सगळे जाण रिपब्लीक डे मनयता. भारताचे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन 26 जानेवारी 1950 ह्या दिसा लागू केले. बट ते कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन हे ड्राफ्ट केले आणि जेन्ना एक्सेप्ट केले जर केन्ना आसत जाल्यार ते 26 नोव्हेंबर 1949. आमी सातत्यान हो दीस सगळेच जाण विसरलेले. आमी सगळ्या जाणांक याद उरताली तो फक्त 26 जानेवारी होच दीस याद उरताले. ऑनरेबल प्रायम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदीजी हांच्यांनी द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन डे म्हणून सगळ्यांच्या मुखार हाडून ह्या दिसा ह्या भारताचे संविधान बरयलें. म्हणजे 15 ऑगस्ट 1947 ह्या दिसा भारत देश स्वतंत्र जालो. ह्या देशाचे 2 देश जाले. हा मुद्दामून यादूय करता, इंडिया आनी पाकिस्तान. कालांतरान पाकिस्तानाचो पाकिस्तान आनी बांगलादेश जाले. म्हणजे एका देशाचे 3 देश निर्माण जाले आणि त्या 3 देशांपैकी त्या 3 देशाची स्थिती कितें आसा ही आमच्या सारकिल्या सगळ्या तरणाट्यांनी आज समजावून घेवपाक जाय. बांगलादेशाची स्थिती आज कितें आसा हांवें सांगपाची गरज ना. थंयसरल्या प्रेसिडेंटाक जर थंयसरले म्हणजे थंय कितें डेमोक्रेसी आसा, थंय कशा पद्दतीची डेमोक्रेसी, ब्युरोक्रेसी आनी हिपोक्रेसी चलता हे आमी सगळ्यांनी लक्षात घेवपाक जाय. कारण मुळात प्रेसिडेंटाकूच जर धांवडोवन घालता मागीर देशांत कितें उरलें. नेक्स्ट इज द पाकिस्तान. पाकिस्तान ह्या सारकिल्या कंट्रीत केन्ना तांच्या प्रेसिडेंटाक किंवा प्रायम मिनिस्टराक गन दाखयतले आनी तूं सकयल देंव म्हणटले हे आमच्यान सांगून नजो. म्हणजे एट एनी टायम ते केन्नाय गन दाखोवपाक शकता आणि तूं चल मिलिटरी रूल आमी लागू करूं शकता. बट बिसायड दॅट आमचो भारत देश आसा जातूंतल्यान आमी डेमोक्रेसी फॉलो करता. इट इज ऑफ द पीपल, बाय द पीपल, फॉर द पीपल. म्हणजे सातत्यान म्हणजे आमचो भारत देश इट इज अन मदर ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी हे म्हणपाक कांयच हरकत ना. कारण मुळात आयचो टॉपिक कितें आसा हाजेर म्हाज्या पयलीं उलोवपी जस्टीस मृदुल हे निव्वळ तुमच्या कडेन उलयल्लो आसा. बट बेजीक फंडामेंटल्स ऑफ द डेमोक्रेसी आमी जर आमकां जर समजना आनी कशा पद्दतीन आमी फॉलो करप हे जर आमी समजले ना जाल्यार सातत्यात आमची स्थिती म्हणजे अशी जावपाक शकता एक दीस केन्ना तरी बांगलादेश आनी पाकिस्तान ह्या देशा सारकी. आमी सातत्यात सगळे जाण आमचे रायट्स कितें हाज्या खातीर झगडटा. पण आमच्यो ड्युटीज कितें हाज्या खातीर म्हाका दिसता कोणूच केन्ना ते वाचीना, ते पळयना आनी ते समजूनय घेयना. डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर हांच्यानी जी घटना बरयली हांव म्हाका भाग्यवान समजता. ड्युरींग माय स्पीकर टेन्युअर म्हाका ओरिजिनल कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनची प्रती पळोवपाकूय मेळ्ळी आनी ओरिजिनल कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनच्या प्रती म्हणजे ताजे रायटर्स जे आशिल्ले इट इज B.N. राव, सुरेंद्रनाथ मुखर्जी आणि डॉक्टर के मुंशी, डॉक्टर सय्यद मोहम्मद सौदुल्ला, N. माधवराव, N. गोपालस्वामी अय्यगर आणि अलत कृष्णस्वामी अय्यर या सगळ्यांनी जे देशाचे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बरयलें ताजी प्रती म्हाका पळोवपाकूय मेळ्ळी आणि ओरिजिनल म्हणजे इन द सेंट्रल हॉल ऑफ दॅट पार्लमेंट ती पळोवपाची संद म्हणजे स्पीकर असल्या कारणान म्हाका पळोवपाक मेळ्ळी आणि तातूंतल्यानूच आमी सातत्यान बऱ्योचश्यो गजाली आमी आमच्या रायट्साचेर उलयता. आमी जर पळयत जाल्यार गोंय थोडेशें वेगळें आनी कशा पद्दतीन आमी फॉलो करता हें जर पळयलें आसत जाल्यार युनिफॉर्म सिव्हील कोड हे फॉलो करपी गोंय हे देशांतलें पयलें राज्य आसा. आमी म्हणटा की सर्व धर्म समभावतेत जर वागले आसले जाल्यार कितें फरक पडटा. ज्या भारताच्या घटनेन आमकां सर्व धर्म समभावता युनिफॉर्म सिव्हील कोड, कॉमन सिव्हील कोड हो फॉलो करपाचो आमकां जर अधिकार दिला आसत जाल्यार प्रत्येकाक न्याय धर्मानुसार आणि जातीनुसार तो कित्याक. मागीर ह्या देशात आमी युनिफॉर्म सिव्हील कोड कित्याक फॉलो करचो न्ही. ह्या देशात वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन कित्याक आसचें न्ही. हेजो विचार म्हाका दिसता युवा पिढीत करपाची गरज आसा. हे सगळें करता आसतना आमी सातत्यान पळयता की फाटल्या 26 जानेवारी ह्या दिसाची थीम कितें आशिल्ली. ह्या दिसाची थीम आशिल्ली विकसीत भारत 2047. कारण दर फावटी जर आमी ह्या देशाक थीम दिवन जर फुडें गेले नासत जाल्यार ह्या देशाची दिशा ही ठरची ना. म्हणून तर ऑनरेबल प्रायम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदीजी हांच्यांनी आमच्या रिपब्लीक डे दिसा जी देशाक थीम दिली की विकसीत भारत, ह्या देशाचो जर विकास जातलो आसत आमी जेका म्हणटा की 5 ट्रिलियन इकॉनॉमी जर जावपाक जाय, जी फ्रजायल इकॉनॉमी 10 नंबराचेर आशिल्ली ताच्या पासून आमकां 5 नंबराचेर आणि इन फ्युचर जर 3 नंबराचेर पावपाक जाय आसत जाल्यार काही गजाली आमकां फॉलो करच्यो पडटल्यो. सातत्यान आमी जेंडर इक्विलिटीचेर सदोदीत उलयता विच इज एन फुलफिलमेंट ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्युशनल मॅन्डेट. आमी सातत्यान पळयता की सगळे जाण म्हणटा की सगळ्या जाणांक समान हक्क आसपाक जाय. पण खरेंच आतां पर्यंत जेंडर इक्विलिटी फॉलो करताले काय कितें तशें पळोवंक वचत मागीर 33% रिजर्वेशन्स कित्याक दिवचे पडले. अजून पर्यंत गेल्या 75 वर्सांच्या भितर ती जेंडर इक्विलिटी कित्याक घेवंक नाशिल्ली. ऑनरेबल प्रायम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदीजी हांच्यांनी 33% जर पॉलिटिकल रिजर्वेशन्स हे जर फॉलो केले आसत जाल्यार ती इक्विलिटी खंय तरी आमच्या देशांत हाडपाची गरज आशिल्ली. आमी वेगवेगळ्यो गजाली म्हणजे गोंय हे तशें पळोवंक वचत जाल्यार एक मॉडल राज्य आमी सगळ्या देशा खातीर म्हणपाक काय हरकत ना. Since we are practicing uniform civil code, since we are practicing various laws in the state of Goa, म्हणजे जेणेकरून 1961 म्हणजे जरी आमी 14 वर्सां भले उसरा स्वतंत्र झाले आसत सुद्धा बट तेन्नाच्यान आतापर्यंत आमी बरे प्रोग्रेसिव्ह लॉज म्हणजे जे बरे आशिल्ले लॉज फ्रॉम द पोर्तुगीज रिजीम ते आमी आमच्या कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन घेवन आमी तेच्या बरोबर ते कंटिन्यू केले. हाकाच लागून आमी गोंय हे एक स्टेप बाकीच्या राज्याच्या पेक्षा कितलीशीच बरी अचिव्हमेंट ही करपाक शकले. आयच्या घडीक हांव फक्त चड वेळ न उलयता एक 2च विशय तुमच्या समोर सातत्यान घेतलो. आमी सगळे जाण रायट्साक झगडत आसतना आमची ड्युटी स्पेशली द प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ एनवायरमेंट ह्या विशयाचेर कोणूच केन्नाच उलयना. तें काम फक्त सरकाराचेंच काय कितें. सातत्यान सगळे जाण पळयता की हे गोंय हे स्वच्छ आसूंक जाय, सुंदर आसपाक जाय. तें काम कोणाचें? फक्त सरकाराचें, इतर लोकांचें न्ही. हे जर आमी करतले आसत जाल्यार म्हाका दिसता जशें आमी आमच्या रायट्साक झगडटा तितक्योच आमी आमच्यो ड्युटीज कितें ह्यो सातत्यान सगळ्या जाणांक जर इम्प्लिमेंट करपाक लायल्यो, त्यो ड्युटीज जर फॉलो करपाक लायल्यो जाल्यारूच आमी खऱ्या अर्थान आमी म्हणटले की कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन्स आमी फॉलो करता हें म्हणपाक काय हरकत ना. त्या खातीर म्हाजी आयच्या दिसा म्हणजे ह्या कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन डेच्या दिसा हांव सगळ्या जाणांक रिक्वेस्ट करतलो ज्या पद्दतीन आमी आमचे रायट्स विशेष करून प्रत्येक जण म्हणजे आपलो रायट्स कितें हाच्या खातीर झगडत आसा. सगळे जण रायट्सा खातीर झगडटा, वेगवेगळ्या रायट्सा खातीर झगडटा. त्या कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनान दिल्ल्यो ड्युटीज ज्यो आसा बींग अ ह्युमन बींग त्यो ड्युटीजूय आमी ज्यो आसा प्रत्येकान फॉलो करप ह्यो तितक्योच गरजेच्यो आसा. आनी म्हाका दिसता त्यो ड्युटीज जर फॉलो करपाक शकले जाल्यार खऱ्या अर्थान म्हणजे जे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बरयल्लें तें सार्थक जातलें अशें दिसता. नाजाल्यार म्हणजे आज पर्यंत म्हणजे गेली 75 वर्सां लागली की आमकां 75 वर्साच्या उपरांत सुद्दां 33% रिजर्वेशन दिवचें पडटा. 75 वर्साच्या उपरांत सुद्दां आमकां जेंडर इक्विलिटी खातीर झगडचें पडटा. 75 वर्साच्या उपरांत सुद्दां आमकां हो देश विकसीत करपा खातीर वेगवेगळ्यो गजाली वेगवेगळ्यो स्टेप्स बेजीक गोश्टी ज्यो गरज आशिल्ल्यो त्यो दिवच्यो पडटा. त्यो हाज्या पयलींच केन्ना तरी जावपाक जाय आशिल्ल्यो बट त्यो जाल्यो ना. निदान हाज्या फुडें म्हाका दिसता ह्यो सगळ्यो गजाली जावपा खातीर आमी जर प्रयत्न केले जाल्यार निश्चित रित्या खूब बऱ्या पद्दतीन आमी हें सगळें फॉलो करपाक शकतले. आय एम नॉट गोईंग इन डिटेल्स म्हणजे खंयचे आर्टिकल आनी कितें. मोस्ट ऑफ यू आर द लॉ स्टुडंट्स. सगळ्या जाणांक बऱ्या पद्दतीचो लॉ स्टुडंट्स आसल्या कारणान तुमी सगळे जाण ह्या वेगवेगळ्या आर्टिकल्स आनी वेगवेगळे लॉज हेजो स्टडी करीत आसा. बट हाजें इम्प्लिमेंटेशन जाता काय ना हें पळोवपा खातीर तुमी सगळ्यांनी काम करप गरजेचें आसा. कालांतरान आमी पळयता की अंडर RTI आयलें, इन्फॉर्मेशन कमिशन्स आयले किंवा वेगवेगळे एक्ट वुमन्स कमिशन आयले. हे डे बाय डे म्हणजे एक अपग्रेडेशन जे आसा सातत्यान आमी करीत आसा. हाज्या पयलीं ह्यो गजाली नाशिल्ल्यो. म्हणजे वुमन्स कमिशन म्हणा किंवा इन्फॉर्मेशन कमिशन RTI ह्यो सगळ्यो गजाली कित्याक आयल्यो तर आमी सगळ्या जाणांनी ट्रान्सपरन्सी इन द गव्हर्नन्स आसचें आणि ह्याच ट्रान्सपरन्सी इन द गव्हर्नन्स जेणे करून आमी फॉर द पीपल टू द पीपल बाय द पीपल जे म्हणटा ते एक्च्युअल इम्प्लिमेंटेशन जावचें आणि तेंच जावपा खातीर म्हणजे गव्हर्नन्स हें जावपा खातीरूच ह्यो सगळ्यो गजाली सरकारान सातत्यान इम्प्लिमेंट करपाक सुरवात केल्ली आसा. म्हणून ह्या मॉडल कॉन्स्टिट्युशनच्यो सगळ्यो आयडियाज इम्प्लिमेंट करपा खातीर सातत्यान युवा पिढीक फुडें येवपाची गरज आसा. ऑनरेबल प्रायम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदीजी हांचे विकसीत भारताचें स्वप्न साकार करपा खातीर तांच्यांनी ह्या देशांतलो युवक हांच्यांनी म्हणजे जशें म्हणटा की क्लीन इंडिया, स्टार्टअप इंडिया, मेक इन इंडिया, डिजिटल इंडिया पासून फिट इंडिया पर्यंत हे प्रत्येक मिशन ह्या देशांतल्या तरणाट्या खातीर आसा. ह्या देशांतले म्हणजे प्रत्येक तेंच्यांनी जी आयडियाज इम्प्लिमेंट केल्या ती ह्या देशांतल्या म्हणजे तरणाट्याक कॉन्सन्ट्रेट तरणाट्याक समोर दवरून केल्या म्हणपाक काय हरकत ना. म्हणून आमी जर ह्या बऱ्या पद्दतीन हाजें इम्प्लिमेंटेशन व्यवस्थीत करपाक जर शकले आसत जाल्यार खऱ्या अर्थात ह्या आज म्हणजे 75 वर्साच्या उपरांत सुद्दां आमी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन डे मनयता आसतना आमकां सगळ्यांक सार्थ अभिमान जाता आसतलो की डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर हांच्यांनी सगळ्या जाणांक इक्वल रायट्स दिवपाचो खंयसरूच म्हणजे आमी म्हणटा की डिस्क्रिमिनेट करूं ना. म्हणजे फ्रॉम जरी म्हटले आसत जाल्यार ताका इक्वल रायट्स दिवपाचें काम जें आसा तें सातत्यान तेन्नाय केलां. म्हणून त्यो इक्वल ड्युटीज कितें आपल्यो ह्यो प्रत्येकान फॉलो करपाची गरज आसा आनी त्यो ड्युटीज जर फॉलो केल्यो जाल्यार खऱ्या अर्थान हो देश जो आसा हो विकसीत राष्ट्र म्हणून फुडें येतलें. आयच्या दिसा परत एकदां हांव म्हज्या युवा मित्र आनी मैत्रिणी कडेन एकच मागणी करता की हो देश विकसीत जावपा खातीर तुमचे सगळ्यांचें कॉन्ट्रिब्युशन हें खूब म्हत्वाचें आसा. इट इज नॉट ओन्ली द प्रायम मिनिस्टर आनी चीफ मिनिस्टर हू कॅन डू द विकसीत भारत हें स्वप्न साकार करपाक शकना. हो विकसीत भारताचें स्वप्न विकसीत राष्ट्राचें स्वप्न जर साकार जातलें आसत जाल्यार तेतून कॉन्ट्रिब्युशन ईच अँड एवरी इंडियन आनी विशेश करून ईच अँड एवरी यूथ हाचें कॉन्ट्रिब्युशन आसप हें चड म्हत्वाचें आसा आनी तें तुमी कॉन्ट्रिब्युशन दितले हाची अपेक्षा करता आनी म्हाजी 2 उतरां सोंपयता. जय हिंद, जय भारत.
Now the floor is open for questions. Our keynote speaker has enlightened us and given us a lot of food for thought. I request students, faculty, members of the audience to raise your hands. Our faculty will come here with the mic and take your questions. Please keep your questions brief. Students, please do take a